Right now we have only a couple of minutes for questions, comments from the audience before we wrap up. So I open the floor. Here in front, please.
Jane Terry from the OAS. I have a quick question for each of you, different questions. So for Sean, now we have leaders in the United States, Bolivia, Venezuela, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay that come from formerly excluded political sectors. Do you see any difference from a kind of leadership perspective of those leaders being able to be better at working on exclusionary policies? For Dina, on religious, I don't like the word tolerance, actually. I think it's more like embracing diversity, not just tolerating it, right? Is there kind of a lessons learned from the Jewish community about Muslim acceptance, being this is September 11th, and we still have this very deep problem here in the U.S. And for Mark, the interesting thing to me is that in your community, you're talking about the homosexual community, there's an extra element of hidden identity that's different from Afro-descendentes, etc. And I'm wondering if this increased violence is leading toward additional hiding of identity. I was impressed at a radio show in the district where there was a community center of youth for homosexuals, transgenders, etc. And the phone calls were how relieved these kids were to have some place they can go where they could be who they are. So that was my question for you. Thank you.
We'll take them in that order.
Great question. First of all, the symbolism is important, but it isn't just symbolism. I mean, this is real change. People who were formerly excluded, or from communities that were formerly excluded, are being elected into office, and I think that's a clear and positive move forward. Does it mean that they're more able to have enlightened, inclusive policies and actions? Yes, I think so. But I don't think it's an automatic, because there are a lot of issues. There's questions of levels of trust, the questions of do they or the communities they represent feel like there needs to be some reverse discrimination, which of course isn't good, and that's not going to move things forward. But I think generally they're going to be better positioned to understand what the issues are, and then the question is there a level of trust? Is there a level of confidence? Can I work with the majority population that formerly excluded us or discriminated against us? And I put a lot of focus on leadership, but obviously it has to be a collective effort. I mean, citizenry needs to work with leaders on these issues. I think, in the case, in many of these cases, there's a leader has to be able to not forget where they came from, not ignore the issue, but at the same time it shouldn't be the central piece of or the central identifying factor. In the United States now, we don't continuously refer to President Obama as the first black president. In Europe, they still do. Every article in Spain mentions that he's black. At some point, you have to not forget it, because it remains an issue. Race remains an issue, but it shouldn't be the central identifying issue, because otherwise we can't get beyond it.
Thank you. Dina?
Sure. Well, from the perspective of an organization like the American Jewish Committee that has a focus on intergroup relations, I can tell you that we work with Muslim communities all over the United States, trying to identify partners with whom we can find a common agenda, we can build trust, and try to fight, stereotypes and racial profiling and all those issues that polarize society, and fight or go against what we want as a society to be a welcoming, open, diverse society. So I can tell you from the perspective of working with the Latino communities that, as you know, today Latinos are one of the most discriminated group against in the United States. And you see a lot of hate crimes going on every single day, and also racial profiling. We have been very successful in trying to find partners and interlocutors and building those coalitions. It doesn't mean that you agree on everything, and I think that that's one of the main lessons that we've found working with so many groups throughout so many years. You can be partners on certain issues, and you can agree to disagree on other issues. But at the end of the day, I think you build, you build an undercurrent of trust and of understanding with this belief that you have a shared fate and a shared future in the well-being of this country. So I don't know if I answer your question, but...
Thank you. Mark?
Interesting question about the ability of many, particularly lesbians and gay men, to hide their identity. And I think the reality is that because more and more lesbians and gay men are choosing not to hide their identity, the fact they are coming out, that I think is clearly reflected in the increase in hate crime violence. There are more open lesbian and gay men and women out there, and they are subjected to more violence because of it. I think also it's an inevitable relationship to legal progress. I mean, virtually every step of the way in terms of legal reform and the legal recognitions that exist, there have been generally very acrimonious social debates about whether our community should be recognized. Healthy debate is one thing, but those debates often turn very nasty. And I think that also drives some of the increase we've seen in hate crime violence. In terms of the transgender community, I think the violence tends to be most extreme because they are perceived most as challenging culture, challenging gender stereotypes, in a way that really just exposes them to remarkable violence. And the fact that there is such extreme violence means, I think, that it's absolutely remarkable that these individuals have such a sense that they are not the gender that was reflected in the sexual organs they received at birth. They have just this overriding sense of their own individual gender in the world, that they're willing to go out every day and expose themselves to this level of violence, to death even in many cases. That's what I think is truly remarkable. And the fact that more and more individuals are willing to do that, is creating a cycle of violence that we need to put an end to.
Desafortunadamente el tiempo se nos ha acabado. Quisiera finalizar este panel dándole un agradecimiento muy sincero a Sean, a Dina, a Mark por estas excelentes presentaciones y les pediría que los despidiéramos con un gran aplauso.